After years of silence, police opened a door in Lima, Peru, and uncovered something they would never forget. Inside a small home, hidden behind walls, beneath the floor, the remains of women who had simply vanished. Their bodies have been dismembered by a man. 3,787 human bones were found in his home. Most of them were women. He kills, and most times eats them. Who was the man living there? How did he lure his victims? What twisted motivations drove him? And how did investigators finally uncover the truth? Tonight, we unravel the chilling story of André Mendoza, the Peruvian serial killer who hid horror in plain sight. This is not just a story about crime, it's a story about manipulation, control, dark fantasies, and the terrifying reality that sometimes monsters don't hide in the shadows, they blend in. André Mendoza shocked Peru when authorities discovered multiple victims inside his property in 2021. His arrest revealed a disturbing pattern of calculated deception and violence. But to understand how this happened, we have to go back to the beginning. André Mendoza was born in Peru in the late 1960s. While detailed records of his early childhood are limited, reports indicate he grew up in a modest environment marked by instability. Many serial offenders share common early risk factors: exposure to domestic dysfunction, emotional neglect, isolation, early behavioral disturbances. In Mendoza's case, acquaintances described him as quiet, socially withdrawn, and often resentful toward women later in life. As a young man, he struggled to maintain stable employment and relationships. He reportedly worked various jobs but never established lasting success. What's important here is not to excuse his crimes, but to examine patterns often seen in violent offenders: difficulty forming healthy attachments, obsession with control, developing distorted views about intimacy. Over time, resentment can evolve into fantasy. Fantasy can evolve into planning, and planning can evolve into action. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing. André Mendoza didn't stalk strangers randomly. He built trust first. He used dating apps. He invited women into his home. He appeared calm, polite, ordinary. And for years, no one suspected what was happening behind closed doors. Investigators later determined that Mendoza targeted women he met online. Authorities reported that he contacted women through dating platforms, lured them to his residence, attacked them inside his home. Psychologists analyzing similar offenders point to key motivational factors. 1. Control and power. Serial killers often seek domination. The act becomes less about rage and more about possession. 2. Misogynistic resentment. Some reports suggested Mendoza harbored deep anger toward women. Rejection or perceived humiliation can fuel violent fantasies in unstable individuals. 3. Compartmentalization. He lived a seemingly ordinary life while allegedly hiding horrific acts. This psychological split allows offenders to separate normal life from violent behavior. Authorities believe he murdered multiple women between 2015 and 2020. Some victims were reported missing. Families searched. Time passed, but the trail was slowly forming. The break in the case came in 2021. A 34-year-old mother of two said goodbye to her family and headed out to the shops one morning, but she never returned home. Renya Gonzalez's police officer husband immediately started looking for her, but he was not prepared for what he would find. Reina's husband, Bruno, went to Mendoza's home to see if he knew where she was that evening, but the pensioner refused to let him inside, immediately raising his suspicion. He returned to Mendoza's home in Mexico City with his law enforcement colleagues, filled with rage that the elderly man might have some knowledge of where his wife was. But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw next. On the kitchen table were his wife's dismembered remains. Mendoza, a former butcher, admitted that he had killed Reina and tried to run away. But the police officers stopped him in his tracks. When Bruno Portillo discovered what had happened to his beloved wife, he would, along with his colleagues, end up unraveling a horrifying series of crimes and catching a prolific serial killer, the identity of which nobody would ever have suspected. Under the flashing lights of nightclubs, as people danced unawares to the music, the serial killer would often select his victims before tricking them into coming back to his home, where he would murder them, take apart their remains, and eat them. Caught when he was 72 years old, Andrés Filomeno Mendoza was well respected in his community. even elected to lead a local political group. He had for 20 years continued his murdering and cannibalistic spree uninterrupted, but when he targeted 34-year-old Reina, it all came crashing down around him. Searching his home, they found the remains of many more victims and evidence linked to many cold cases of missing women. The evil serial killer, dubbed the Cannibal of Atizapan, was called Affable by his surprised neighbors as bones were discovered in the basement of his home, and forensic analysts and other experts were brought in to see just how prolific his crimes were. He chillingly kept a list of the women's names in a notebook. There were 30 written down. There were also videotape. Workers also found women's clothing and shoes, which allegedly belonged to the victims who were butchered by Mendoza. He also peeled the skins off the women's faces and their scalps, authorities said. According to InfoBuy, Mendoza drove the knife into Gonzalez's chest and then used a machete to cut her limbs off before stuffing her body parts into a bag. Authorities also seized a collection of videotapes that reportedly contained the names of several women with footage of their killings and a notebook with the names of 29 women. Investigators also found voter identification cards of Rubicela Castillo, 32, who was reported missing July 20, 2019, and Flor Vizcaino, 38, who was last seen October 16, 2016. Peruvian authorities launched a full-scale investigation. Digital forensics played a critical role. Dating app records, phone communications, GPS tracking, surveillance footage. Forensic anthropologists were brought in to identify remains. Families were notified as DNA confirmations were completed. The emotional toll on investigators was significant. Cases involving concealed victims inside a suspect's home are particularly disturbing due to the prolonged deception involved. Police worked to reconstruct timelines: when victims were last seen, when they entered Mendoza's home, when contact ceased. Each piece of evidence strengthened the case. Andre Mendoza was formally charged with multiple counts of homicide. Under Peruvian law, serial homicide carries severe penalties. He was placed in custody pending trial. Prosecutors sought the maximum sentence allowed under Peru's criminal code. In 2023, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court cited premeditation, multiple victims, extreme cruelty, concealment of remains. He will spend the remainder of his life behind bars. The case sparked national debate in Peru about online dating safety, background checks, protection for women, law enforcement tracking of missing persons. Vigils were held for the victims. Families demanded justice and systemic reform. The tragedy highlighted the importance of meeting in public spaces, informing loved ones of plans, using safety features in dating apps. Andre Mendoza lived quietly. He smiled. He chatted. He invited women over for what seemed like normal dates. But behind that door was something far darker. His story forces us to ask, how well do we really know the people we trust, and how many warning signs go unnoticed until it's too late? This case remains one of Peru's most disturbing modern criminal investigations. It reminds us that evil does not always look obvious. It can look ordinary. If you found this breakdown informative, remember to like, subscribe, and share, and comment below your thoughts on this case. What warning signs stand out to you? Until next time. Stay aware, stay safe.